Then, now, forever. Together.
There is no place like this on a big fight weekend. The brilliant lights of the Vegas Strip shine a bit brighter. The rumble of excitement builds a little louder as the anticipation grows for generational greatness. Canelo and Crawford has arrived, and with that comes sports and entertainment stars everywhere you look in this city, including what's about to happen right here. The incredible Fontainebleau Hotel. It's been a dynamic force since it arrived as Vegas's most impressive new palace. And in moments, it's where the next big headline-making announcement will be heard as we welcome you inside the Fontainebleau on this electrifying weekend of sports and entertainment in Vegas. Hi, everybody. I'm Joe Tessitore. Thrilled you're with us. And we welcome all of you watching from all over the globe for what is about to be made official as a historic moment in sports entertainment. This is truly one of the great weekends in Vegas in a long time. And it began with last night's incredibly successful Underdog Fight Night presented by Ring Magazine. It's going to carry into tonight with WWE's AAA Worlds Collide. That's going to be from the Pavilion at the Thomas & Mack Center just down the road. And then Monday Night Football is here in town. The Vegas Raiders at their magnificent Allegiant Stadium will be taking on and hosting the LA Chargers. But it's what's going to happen there at Allegiant Stadium on Saturday night. That is the reason why the whole sports world is converging here in Vegas. The Riyadh season card, as the great Canelo Alvarez and the undefeated Terrence Crawford go for the Ring Magazine and undisputed super middleweight championship of the world that comes your way Saturday night. And keep in mind, this comes in the same calendar year that Allegiant Stadium hosted an all-time record-breaking WrestleMania. By every measurable, WrestleMania 41 was notable. And it gets an encore performance because WrestleMania is going to be back here in Vegas come next April. Now, all of that does not happen without star power. And do we have star power here today? Let's welcome to the stage the superstars who have propelled the WWE to new heights. And on a day like this, we get to reflect a little bit. It gives us a chance to realize the unprecedented growth of sports entertainment. So we will start with two of the pillars by which modern WWE has been built. Two men who are instrumental in turning the WWE into a global powerhouse, the Hall of Famers, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, and the Phenom, The Undertaker. Also with us for today's historic announcement, two women who have each main evented WrestleMania. The Queen, Charlotte Flair, and the EST, Bianca Belair. And two of the most popular and talented stars. A recent women's champion, a tag team champion, and she won Crown Jewel in Riyadh. Liv Morgan is with us, as well as the rising star who will battle for the women's championship next weekend, Stephanie Vaquer. And finally, we welcome the dynamic, the high-flying, the sensational Logan Paul, as well as the world heavyweight champion, the visionary Seth Rollins. These are the athletes. These are the superstars. These are the characters and the legends and the champions who keep pushing the business to the next level and to new heights. I sit here and I reflect on everything, those standing behind me in this historic day, and for 25 years I've been blessed to be out here in Vegas covering mega events, and some things really never change. The thrill of calling a bout with two of the best fighters in the world, we're going to have that on Saturday night, or a massive football game that's going to take place at Allegiant Stadium that the whole country is going to be glued to. But what has changed that I find remarkable, over the course of recent years, we have witnessed a change that has served the fans all over the world better than ever. It is the global growth of WWE. And please welcome a man who has crafted, guided, envisioned all of this to be WWE's Chief Content Officer and newly minted Hall of Famer, Paul Triple H Levesque. Paul?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you all for being here today. This is an incredible day. Since 1985, WrestleMania has stood as the pinnacle of sports and entertainment and as one of the greatest sports franchises the world has ever seen. From its humble beginnings in Madison Square Garden on closed-circuit TV, WrestleMania has grown into a cultural phenomenon that brings people together from across the globe, complete with stadiums, arena shows, fan events, premium experiences, and community outreach programs. Today, WrestleMania is shown to the world, seen in more than 200 countries. In the U.S., live on ESPN's brand new streaming service. Internationally, live on Netflix. On April 18th and 19th of 2026, everyone knows WWE will be back here in spectacular Las Vegas for WrestleMania 42. But today, we are here to talk about what's next in the legacy of WrestleMania. And to help us announce this, I want to welcome a dear friend. We are currently in our 8th year of a long-term and fruitful partnership with the General Entertainment Authority, the GEA. This partnership, guided by His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh, has seen historic firsts year after year as we work together to collectively reshape what's possible in global entertainment. So please welcome a man who is changing the face of sports and of entertainment. Please welcome my friend and our partner, His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh. We have already announced that the Royal Rumble is headed to Riyadh January 31st of 2026. And today, we announce something that takes this partnership to a new level. So on behalf of His Excellency, on behalf of Nick Khan, WWE President, who was the driving force on this deal, I would like to announce that for the first time ever, WrestleMania will be held outside of the United States and Canada. In 2027, we are proud to announce that WrestleMania 43 will take place in Saudi Arabia as part of Riyadh season. History will undoubtedly be made again. You are making history a lot lately. Thanks to our partners at the GEA and Riyadh season, we just could not be more excited for this opportunity. This is an opportunity to show the world what I think most people already know, that WWE is a global brand that reaches every corner of the world and excites fans from everywhere. Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, congratulations. Congratulations, Turkey. Paul, I'll ask you to take a seat, Paul, His Excellency. And I'll tell you what, let's continue the conversation, get some of the superstars and legends involved. Taker, you can sit next to your good friend. I know he likes that very much. And Bianca, how about you take a seat next to Triple H, if you would. And Taker, I want to start with you because a few years ago, I remember being over in Riyadh as His Excellency was hosting the Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou fight. And you stepped into that magnificent arena there, and the reaction was incredible. It was loud. It was instant. You're beloved in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but with good reason. 4 total matches. You were part of history with the first WWE event there. So for an American WWE fan, an international fan who hears this news today and says to themselves, ooh, I should go, what are they in store for?
They're, without a doubt, they're in store for the incredible passion. I think WWE fans in general are known for their passion for WWE content, and I think people are going to be blown away at that same passion that the people from Saudi Arabia have. His Excellency has just, I mean, he has been such a instrumental force in the growth of WWE in Saudi Arabia. I think people are going to be so pleasantly surprised at the kindness and just the pouring out of the love and appreciation for what we do. And I can only imagine the pomp and circumstances that you always expect from WWE and WrestleMania are going to be off the chart when we go to Saudi Arabia, guaranteed.
No doubt about it. Bianca, you know that well. You've had history there. You've had 9 total matches in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. You won Elimination Chamber there. You were able to retain your women's championship there, your tag team championships there. What has it been like wrestling in Saudi Arabia?
It's amazing. It's amazing to be a part of a lot of great moments. The hospitality, the culture, the crowds are always great. I think Saudi Arabia has become a space specifically for women to make amazing moments and make history that's not just important for little girls and women to see, but for little boys and men in the whole world to see. And every time we go to Saudi Arabia, I see it evolve more and more, whether that's inside the ring with more women on the show or outside the ring with seeing women on billboards and posters. And that became even more apparent to me. Last time I went to Saudi Arabia, we had an all-women's battle royal. That's right. And when we came out, every single woman that came out, the crowd had a chant for them. And when we went backstage, we had a special moment with Natalya because she was a part of the very first women's match in Saudi Arabia. And it has just been very special to see where it started and what it's evolved it into. And it's been an honor to be a part of that progress and that change. And now having WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia, it just shows that WWE, it transcends globally and it continues to make history. And as a woman, it's very special to be a part of this.
Yeah, you've been a special part of it in so many groundbreaking moments now for so many years. Very well said. Paul, today's announcement obviously is massive. I don't know that there's anybody who understands the full evolution and landscape of WWE better than you. So how would you characterize how significant today's announcement is, WrestleMania headed to Saudi?
It's hard to put into words, really, how significant it is and what a partnership that has been over the last 8 years or so. As Bianca mentioned, as The Undertaker mentioned, the evolution of our partnership there, of what we have experienced when we have been there, to see that growth, to see that expansion, it's really been a special thing to see. But I think in this moment in time, WWE going to Saudi Arabia, it's sort of first foray, as much as everybody knows how global we are, our first foray into doing what is essentially our Super Bowl in an international market. And I would also like to add to that this one doesn't happen without His Excellency, doesn't happen without Nick Khan, but it also doesn't happen without the fans of Saudi Arabia, without the fans in Riyadh, without the fans in Jeddah that have shown up time after time, that have gotten louder and louder every single time we have been there, that have done their homework, put in the chants. They know everything. And it is one of our sort of hotbed fan bases, if you will. That has become a big thing globally for us lately, whether it's fans in Paris or England or different locations of who is the loudest. I've got to put Riyadh, Saudi Arabia up on that map of one of the greatest fan bases on the planet. this is an incredible opportunity for us to showcase what we do in a location that has shown significantly time over time that Saudi Arabia, Riyadh season puts on the biggest events and the biggest spectacle. We like to believe that in WWE, we put on the biggest events and the biggest spectacle. So when we come together in 2027, I think you can expect something like you have never seen before, a level of competition, a level of athleticism, a level of stardom that is in that venue, but a level of spectacle like no one has ever seen before.
Yeah, and it's funny, you echo a conversation, His Excellency, that Paul and I have had before about the crowd noise and the growth and the engagement as the years have gone on, getting louder and louder and more engaged, which is what makes it the right move at the right time. His Excellency, first and foremost, congratulations.
Thank you.
It takes passionate leadership. It takes committed leadership to change the landscape of sports. You have been doing that now for some years in many sport categories. Your commitment to WWE has been outstanding. How much does this mean to you personally to have WrestleMania now coming to Saudi Arabia?
First of all, I want to thank the Crown Prince who supported us in Gia. Without him, we cannot do anything. And with his support, especially also for WWE, will happen in our country. And before 8 years ago, I meet my father, Vince McMahon, and Triple H in my home when I was the Minister of Sport in my country. And I say to them, let's go and have changing to the future, doing big project together. And I hope now we delivered some of what we say. Before couples of years, my close friends, Nick Khan, became the president of WWE. And now we are saying to him that you are continue the legacy of Vince McMahon, and you delivered for us a very big project, and very big surprise will come in this year and next year, inshallah. I see WrestleMania in Vegas before 4 months. Bringing 200,000 people to Vegas and bringing $1.5 billion for the city. This is very important for us. For the first time in our region, the big event in the history of entertainment is in our city, in our country, and this is very big to us.
Turkey, for those of us sitting back here stateside and wondering the reaction back home to this news, what does it mean for those back home in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to hear of this big announcement that WrestleMania is coming their way?
For 2 days, one of my office have a mistake and put something in the social media, in his social media for 2 seconds, and he get it out. The people get crazy, and they doesn't believe it. Now it is truth.
Congratulations again, His Excellency. Congratulations, Paul. It is official. 2027 WrestleMania 43 for the first time ever beyond North America. And a reminder, Riyadh has a major event coming up far before that. Royal Rumble will be in Riyadh as well, January 31st of 2026. We also want to remind everybody of everything that's coming your way this weekend, starting in just a few hours tonight. Friday Night SmackDown comes to you live from Norfolk, Virginia. The Beast is back. Brock Lesnar a week away from taking on John Cena. He will be live on SmackDown. Plus, a battle of big men. Drew McIntyre taking on the Viper, Randy Orton. Immediately following SmackDown, you can watch WWE AAA Worlds Collide. It's going to be right down the road here in Vegas. Dirty Dom Mysterio trying to be a double champion as he challenges for the AAA Mega Championship. And then tomorrow night, thanks to His Excellency, we have one of the most intriguing, compelling bouts that you can make in all of boxing. The legendary Canelo Alvarez, the undefeated Bud Crawford, the Ring Magazine, and undisputed Super Middleweight Championship from here in Las Vegas. Enjoy it all, and let it be known, WrestleMania 43 has found its home. Riyadh is going to shine. Thank you, everybody.
Up in your track, can't even see me when I come attack. You know you're liking the way that I back it up. It's every day that I'm stacking up. Why don't you try to come closer? I remember beat that come closer. All of you haters got nothing on me. You be testing my limits, you'll see. I'm a killer, baby, I'm a killer.